Welcome to the Southern City College Birmingham Teaching Assistant Induction for 2023-24. Whether you are joining us as a directly employed member of staff or through an agency, you are now part of a brilliant team that puts learners at the heart of everything we do. In this induction video, we won't cover everything you need to know about work, so separately, you'll be supported by your local manager and learning support coordinator to uncover all the ins and outs of all of our systems that you'll need to use, from EBS, where learner information is stored, to eSpirals, where you log your work, to My Concern, where we report any and all safeguarding concerns. Instead, what I want to cover is a bit about the wider teams you're now part of, to give some initial guidance on what we think the TA role is all about, to introduce you to some key concepts we think are important, to highlight a few do's and don'ts to set you off on the right track, and hopefully to leave you feeling you're on board with our way of doing things. I said you are now part of a team, but actually you are part of several teams. The team of teaching assistants at your campus, but also the whole college team of teaching assistants. And then you're part of the wider additional learning support team. That also includes the learning support coordinators, communication support workers, EHCP coordinators and dyslexia tutors at your campus and across the whole college. And then beyond that, you're part of student engagement, a large team linked by a desire to make learners' college experience the best it can be, including pastoral mentors, welfare officers, careers advisors, enrichment officers and the learning resources team, again, at your campus, but also across the whole college. Now, if you're unfamiliar with some of these job titles, don't worry. Your learning support coordinator will take you through all of this and explain who everyone is and what they do, including the college management team. But taking us back to things that really matter, the support you give to learners, for each of them, you are also a key part of the team around the learner, which will definitely also include their tutors, but could also include colleagues from student engagement or even external support workers, and of course in many cases for younger students, their parents. Your work is important, but it doesn't exist in isolation, and we want you to see the bigger picture. Your immediate role is to ensure that the learners you work with can access the learning in the classes you support, but actually it really doesn't end there, because you play a key role in this team around the learner, fostering their personal growth and development. We will look shortly at how that's quantified for learners with an education, health and care plan, but don't underestimate the holistic impact of a good teaching assistant on all the learners they support. As part of your induction, your manager or learning support coordinator will ask you to complete a self-reflection exercise based on the National Occupational Standards for Learning Support Staff. We would like you to use these as a frame of reference to assure and improve your practice. They underpin an inclusive and ambitious support culture and should set the tone for everything we do in the ALS team. I want to start at the top there with high expectations and achieving goals, in part because this is clearly set out as a must in the Ofsted framework, but also because in the past colleges have been criticised for not being ambitious enough for learners with special educational needs. We need to be really focused on encouraging learners' progress, not just helping them follow the curriculum. This means giving them the right support, but also providing the right opportunities for them to do things for themselves to meet their targets. I'll also be talking about how we can use effective questioning techniques to build our learners' critical thinking skills. When we say engaging and motivating, we know that the way a TA presents a learning activity can be so much more than just breaking it down into smaller chunks or rephrasing the teacher's guidance. TAs can unlock the learning by selling their enthusiasm. The thing with enthusiasm is that it's contagious, you know. What would promoting supportive relationships mean? Well, what we're looking for is mutual respect, making your learners feel liked and valued while maintaining those appropriate professional boundaries. Advocating for your learner where appropriate, but making sure they still have their own voice and ultimately that they're growing their confidence to be more independent and advocate for themselves. Then from that mutual respect, we want to model the attitudes and behaviours of tolerance and respect for others. We build trust with learners through our consistency. They can rely on us to help them regulate their emotions. Learners may get into trouble and go through the disciplinary process, but in terms of their TA support, we give unlimited fresh starts and unlimited new chances to grow and improve. What is a positive and safe learning environment? Well, as well as being physically safe, we mean an inclusive environment where learners are stretched to try their best, but not made to feel foolish for getting things wrong, where they feel wanted, even if in some cases they've never felt wanted at school. There couldn't really be a more collaborative role than being a TA, and we want you to foster warm and productive relationships with the tutors you work with, also with the other TAs you share learners with the learning support coordinators, and potentially with the parents or the external support workers linked to the learner. In terms of the tutor, there's a balance to find. They are ultimately responsible for the lesson and the behaviour in the classroom, and they can even direct you in how they would like you to support the learning. But what we're looking for is a partnership model. I'm sure it comes as no surprise that whether you're supporting a media makeup session or a brickwork session, we're always looking for you to find ways to develop learners' English, maths and IT skills. And lastly, when we say adapting resources, yes, this could mean you as the TA adapting resource, or it could be showing a learner how to adapt the resources themselves using assistive technology. We have asked the ALS team to adopt Bloom's taxonomy, not just as a way to understand cognition better, but actually as a useful tool in building learners' thinking skills. Remember, we want to be ambitious for all learners and at all levels. If you Google Bloom's, you will see it's a very well-established model used in several fields, not just in education. It's what they call a hierarchical model, which is why you'll often see it depicted on a pyramid, a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever seen that one. As part of your induction, you'll be given 2 Bloom's cards to help remind you of the way this model can be put into practice. As you can see, the cards are not in the shape of a pyramid. Both have the same thing on one side, the Bloom's hierarchical model of 6 levels of learning objectives. On the other side of each card are the same levels interpreted into what they might mean for learners. One card is more simple, it's on the top right here, and the other a bit more complex, and that's the bottom right here. Put simply, we want to help learners not only remember what they've been taught, but wherever we can, to support them to gain mastery of the learning. Hopefully, if you read from the bottom up to the top, you can recognise the progression from remembering the facts, which is hard enough in itself, to making sense of them so that learners can explain the meaning of the learning, to being able to use the information to solve a problem, to being able to compare the information and see where it sits with other ideas they've learned, to being able to judge its value and have an opinion on it, and ultimately, perhaps to be able to be a bit playful with it and use the learning innovatively. The key skill that we are suggesting teaching assistants can use to help learners to achieve and move through these stages of learning and understanding is by using questioning techniques. You'll be given this handout of Bloom's question stems to support you. You will note that we can test memory and knowledge with questions like, what is this, what is that, or when did so and so happen? But we really promote higher thinking skills when we can get to applying questions like, what would happen if you took this action, or show me a way to organise those things we've been learning about. Then all the way at the top end, we have built up to asking learners to have opinions on what they're learning, to compare and contrast it to other things they've learnt about. Now these questioning techniques could seem easy to apply to, say, I don't know, A-level history, but the challenge here is to use the same techniques in a totally different context to appropriately stretch and challenge learners at all levels, including those with significant needs. Try it. It works. Another of our key goals is to make sure that support is individualised to each learner, not generic. And to do this, you'll need to find out as much as you can about them. Let's look at 2 key sources of information about learners you support. First, the college support plan, and then preparation for adulthood outcomes from their EHCP. Right, starting with the support plan, which you'll be shown how to find and access in EBS OnTrack. The top box is just a summary that may include some key diagnoses, for example, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and sometimes a little bit of their history of support at school, perhaps naming any prescribed medication they're taking. As you will doubtless already know, top-line information like this may be educationally relevant, but as with all summaries, it's a bit reductive, and those snippets of information won't tell you anything like the whole story. It's important that you meet learners with an open mind. Don't be fooled by the confirmation bias that can come from reading a label they've been given. The next section is a list of what the college is saying it will do to meet their needs. The first item is almost always tutor differentiation. That's right, it's not all down to you. Support for learners should always be a collaborative project. It may then say something like in-class support in key sessions, or in-class support in all sessions, or shared support in maths and English. It will depend on the learner. It may then also talk about support from visiting professionals like the local sensory team for visual or hearing impairment, and it may also note that they require exam access arrangements. The bit I would like you to pay most attention to is the differentiation and support strategies. I can't go through all the things that could be listed here, but let's cover a few just to give a flavour. Now, if you've ever looked through an EHCP, they break young people's needs down into the headings of communication, cognition, social, emotional and mental health, and physical and sensory issues. Our college support plan doesn't break it down like that, but strategies for some or for all of these same areas of needs may find their way into a college support plan. You could be, let's see, guided to use literal language, to help a learner understand complex social situations, to find ways to avoid accidentally triggering their anxiety or humiliating them in front of their peers. You might be asked to find opportunities to recap key learning points, to break down tasks into small sequential steps, or perhaps to provide access to printouts of resources in advance. You could be given warning of anxiety triggers. You could have suggestions for how and when the tutor should agree limited timeouts from class. You could be advised that a learner needs to be seated in a particular position in class to avoid light sensitivity or to see or hear more clearly. You could even be given some very specific signs to look out for that indicate a possible seizure. Now, what I would say here is that after working with a learner for a while, you may become much more expert in knowing their needs than the coordinator who originally wrote the support plan. Pass back ideas to update the plan. It should be a living document. That means it's open to being updated and improved. All learners have what is called an ILP, or individual learning plan, which is used by tutors to measure their starting points, set them targets and measure their progress. Now, in the case of learners with an education, health and care plan, which will be a good proportion of the learners you support as a teaching assistant, the targets set are based upon a section of the EHCP called Section E, Outcomes, which these days are set out using Preparation for Adulthood, or PFA, headings. The good news is that Preparation for Adulthood is an excellent framework for understanding the wider mission of the ALS team. As I've been suggesting, it's great if we can get learners through their qualification, but it's much, much better if we can also help them build the habits, the skills and the attitudes they'll need in their adult lives. Outcomes simply means the things the learner should have achieved by the time they move on from college, hopefully in many cases into employment or even to higher education. The same PFA outcome headings you see here on screen are used in the EHCP for a primary school child, but the nature of the outcomes changes radically as kids get older, so that when a 16-year-old EHCP learner comes to Southern City College, they're expected to be on the last few stages of their journey to adulthood. TAs need to check the EHCP outcomes for the learners they support and the SMART college targets that have been set by tutors based on them, so that they can support, they can monitor and they can measure progress towards them, feeding back to tutors and potentially providing evidence for upload to this ILP. Now, in the first instance, it's the learning support coordinators who have special access to all the EHCP ILPs, so you might need to ask for their support to get access. And then once you're linked to a learner, you'll be given access too. For learners in our discrete foundation provision, the ILP is a document in a Microsoft Teams channel. Again, don't worry, you'll be shown how this works. For learners in our vocational faculties, which used to be called mainstream provision, the ILP is within the EBS system. Again, I won't be focusing on the systems here, more just on how we would like your practice to be informed by the content. In all cases, if a learner has an EHCP, this outcome section will have been copied across from the EHCP into the ILP so that tutors can base their Smart College targets on them. So from these headings then, the one that most tutors will probably feel particularly comfortable with is learning and employment. This is the stuff colleges traditionally understand, and outcomes may include passing a course or gaining employability skills. The next one, towards independence, that could mean very different things for our learners at different levels. In one case, it might mean learning to set an alarm and remembering to use deodorant without prompting. For another, it might mean understanding how to manage income and manage bills. Friendships and community can be what it sounds like, getting along with others, having a good set of friends. But the outcomes set under this heading can sometimes be more about getting ready to take their place in society, including, for example, understanding their rights and responsibilities under the law. Finally, keeping healthy might be about understanding a good diet and keeping to a sensible sleep routine, or it could be about learning to take responsibility for your own health appointments. A lot of this seems more familiar to those who have worked in specialist settings, and it's a natural fit for tutors and TAs working within our own foundation area. But at higher levels of study, this holistic view of the college's role has traditionally been less well understood, and some tutors are relatively new to thinking in these terms. Teaching assistants can help bridge the gap. Your personal connection to the learners you support make it a natural fit for you to be considering their overall development. We hold collaborative sessions for TAs and tutors to discuss the progress of EHCP learners on a 6-week cycle, but you can be thinking about your learners' wider progress much more frequently. Do have those conversations about what they have been up to at the weekend, how they're getting on at home, what sports or other activities they have taken part in. Do be mindful of the college enrichment activities you could encourage them to join in with. Do take note when you see that they're taking part in an event with a visiting speaker on a topic that's relevant to their preparation for adulthood. Do collate any scanned documents or photos they share with you that mark their wider achievements and growth outside of class. It can all be uploaded to the ILP and helps measure their progress. Now, we recognise that many of you will be very experienced, and well, we risk being patronising if we give you an endless list of specific instructions that some could perhaps call teaching granny to suck eggs. That said, over the years, we have seen an awful lot of very good practice, and we've also seen some things we'd like you to avoid. We've talked already about encouraging learners' independence and building their critical thinking skills. This won't happen if their TA does the work for them, or if they're so keen to advocate for the student that they're always speaking for them and they don't let them have their own voice, or if they answer the tutor's questions as if they were the student. You're a teaching assistant, not an assistant to the teacher. So you should not be asked to look after classes on your own, or be sent to do general photocopying, or asked to create resources from scratch for the whole group. If you feel the tutor has misunderstood your role, talk to your learning support coordinator. It's not telling tales, it's ensuring everyone is pulling in the same direction. Naturally, we expect professionalism from TAs, and that includes simple stuff like, being on time to class, not using your mobile phone in class, not taking drinks and snacks into class, and not using your time in class to do your personal, or for that matter, your college admin work on a PC in class. If you're in class, you're there for the learners, full stop. You're not in charge of whole class discipline, the tutor is, but you are another pair of eyes, another pair of ears, and you will need to keep alert to potential situations in class that could have an adverse effect on learning, being ready to intervene discreetly without undermining the tutor, and then making sure to keep them up to date on any problems you've noticed. When your assigned learners are on task, I'm afraid you can't just sit back waiting to be needed. Circulate the group. See which other learners could benefit from your input. Being a TA is an incredibly active role, and it's always asking you to think, how else could I be of help? At various times in the year, we need TAs to do slightly different sets of duties. So when I say be flexible, we'll be asking for a team effort at key times like enrolment and for open evenings. Finally, keep a track of the attendance of all the learners with support plans in your group you're supporting, and be sure to mention any absence to your learning support coordinator. There could be a pattern emerging that needs to be addressed, and the ALS team may well want to be involved in contacting parents and being in the relevant meetings to sort things out. Well, there we have it. We're at the end. There is no end of unit test, so don't be too concerned if you can't remember the order of Bloom's hierarchy of learning objectives, or if you can't list all 4 preparation for adulthood headings, or if you can't tell your college support plan from your individual learning plan. As part of your induction, you'll be given some supporting materials to help some of this stick. And as for your day-to-day role, you'll get great advice from the experienced team around you. Please do ask for help whenever you need it. Welcome to the Additional Learning Support team. It's great to have you with us.